Well, welcome everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started here for our monthly small business webinar. A couple of reminders before we get started. First of all, we do keep recordings of all of our past sessions on our website where it just says past recordings. So feel free to access those at any time. Also, any handouts that were available or copies of the speaker slides are typically posted in the same place the recording is. So feel free to access those anytime you'd like. And today you're actually going to see some links during the presentation. Don't worry about writing them down. We'll have them posted to the website no later than tomorrow. So don't worry about frantically writing down URLs as we're going along here today. Our November session, which I always like to announce, that will be on November 2nd. And we're going to talk there a little bit about carbon accounting will be our November small business webinar series. So mark your calendars for November 2nd for our upcoming session as well. The series overall is brought to you at no cost because a bunch of different organizations have come together to provide some sponsorship. And that includes America's Small Business Development Centers, Montana Department of Commerce, the SBA, Montana State University Extension, Montana Economic Developers Association, the University of Montana, and Grow Great Falls Economic Development have all partnered to make this series available to you at no cost. So certainly appreciate all of those organizations and their help in making this series a possibility. Today, I'm excited. We've got a speaker, and this topic is of particular interest to me. So we have Deborah Gass with us today, and get my notes here in front of me. Deborah is a workforce consultant based out of Missoula with the Job Service, and she's worked for the Montana Department of Labor and Industry in this role for over 24 years, and she's received several statewide awards for her work. In her capacity as a workforce consultant, Deb works with businesses to provide resources and guidance to help them with their business needs. She is a certified affirmative relief trainer and has presented at a variety of human resources training focusing on employment law issues. She is a graduate of the University of Montana and has a BA in organizational communications and public administration. So with that, I'm going to encourage people as we go along here today to send questions as you've got them through the chat window. And when we get a pause, we'll get those in front of Deb. And then at the end of today's sessions, we'll encourage people, if they want to unmute and answer questions verbally, to go ahead and do that as well. So with that, Deb, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll get your slides up here.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Joel. I'm excited to talk about this subject. Jennifer contacted me and said that people were interested, and a lot of the questions that they received were, what do you need to do when you think about hiring a new employee in Montana? So the majority of my presentation is really going to be focused on like the regulations and the websites that you need to be aware of. And in many of the slides, there are live links to places that you need to go to find information or sign up for specific insurance coverages and those kinds of things. So we'll be going through that. And then I also hope that I have a little bit of time at the end to kind of talk about more of the soft side of hiring a new employee, things that you want to think about as far as being a successful business, successful employer, and how to guide your way through the process. So let's go to the next slide, and I apologize that I'm not able to control the slides, so we'll have to use that clunky, Joel, please go to the next slide kind of comments, but I'm just not that technical when it comes to some of this stuff. But the first thing that we'd really like to encourage everyone to do if you're going to start hiring employees is to get a federal employer identification number. So what you'll want to do is go out to www.irs.gov and look for that FEIN sign up. And the reason why this is so important is if you're a new employer looking to hire your first employee, you want to get that EIN because you have to have identifying information on a lot of forms that you'll be turning into the government, to the tax agencies, and this number will also show up on forms that your employee will be able to see. And so I know a lot of times a brand new employer will just use their social security number, but you really don't want that out to the general public. So getting that EIN is really important. Then the next thing that you want to think about when you're registering as an employer is also getting that withholding account number from the Montana Department of Revenue. And you'll also want to sign up for unemployment insurance. So I've got links to both of those organizations down at the bottom of this slide. But the the unique EIN, or the Federal Identification Number, is used for registering for all kinds of things like your workers' comp insurance and your unemployment insurance, and setting yourself up for a variety of different things. And it's just a super important first step. Then the next thing to think about, so let's go to the next slide after you've registered with the IRS, is making sure that you do the withholding allowance certificate. And so this is for the employees. So what I tell employers is there's a lot of paperwork that you have to collect at the very beginning when you first hire someone. And so that includes things like the W-4 and the I-9, and also doing the new hire reporting. So the W-4 is also found on the IRS website. And if you have never done payroll before, I really encourage you to work with a payroll specialist, or somebody who's really good with QuickBooks, your accountant, anything like that, to help them get you set up in the beginning. I know that with one employee, it can seem like a really easy thing to just do the payroll yourself. But if you start out making a small incremental mistake somehow in reporting their payroll or the taxes and things like that, those mistakes can build up. So you really want to make sure that you start with a good foundation. So utilize a professional in this area to make sure that once you get that W-4 form from your employee, that you utilize it and put the right amounts in for your payroll withholdings. So that's what the W-4 is used for, is to determine how much you'll withhold from the individual's wages as far as taxes. And then those payroll taxes do get sent into the federal government, and you're responsible for that as well. Okay, and then there's also a link to the IRS Publication 15, which is the guide for employers, which you would use to determine what that actual amounts to, what the actual amount is to withhold from the employee's paycheck, and it gives you tables and things like that. If you're utilizing an electronic payroll system, they'll have that stuff built right into the system as well. So let's go to the next slide. So the next thing to do is to submit the new hire reporting form. And that's specifically a Montana thing. So if you're hiring employees, what this does is the Department of Public Health and Human Resources wants to know who you've hired and how much money you're paying them, because they'll utilize this information to check their database to see if this individual has some kind of garnishment against their wages, because sometimes they need to find out to make sure that those garnishments take place and children are receiving that income that people are supposed to be sending in. So employers are required to report those newly hired employees within 20 days of the employee's hire date. The information can be found. You just go straight to the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services, and I've got that link down there at the bottom. You can print out forms and mail them in, or you can just file online or give them a call. But they do want you to report. Most people, it's a quarterly basis. You report the wages that those people have earned, so that if they do have a garnishment, you can follow up and send in the money to the correct person. So let's go to step 4, step 5, the next slide. Then setting up those payroll taxes. There's a lot of stuff that goes on with this. So if you don't understand how to set all this up, like I said, work with a professional, especially if it's one employee. I've seen a lot of employers get excited and think that they can do this on their own, but especially when you're setting it up for the first time, make sure you work with a professional, because you're going to need to do federal income tax withholding. And depending on how much money your company makes, some organizations have to submit this withholding information and these taxes once a quarter. Some people do it annually. Some businesses have to do it monthly or every paycheck. So that's really depending on the amount of how big your payroll is. So make sure that you understand when you need to do this withholding, when you need to submit it to the IRS. And then at the end of the year, you'll need to submit W-2s to your employees at the end of the year. And I believe that's by January 31st. So there are links to the W-2, how to find the wage and tax statements, and the IRS Form 94 and the IRS Form 940. Depending on what type of business you have, you'll utilize either all of these or just some of them. So not only will you be doing federal income tax withholding for your employees, you'll also be doing state income tax withholding. And they have a whole different set of tables that you need to use. And the way they do the calculations for that, it's spelled out in the link that you'll see in that slide to the montanarevenue.gov taxes individual income tax. When you go to their website, it can be really complicated to figure out where to go. So I put a little note, look for withholding tax. So when you go to the Department of Revenue's page, scroll down about halfway towards the bottom and look specifically for withholding tax. And when you click on that, it opens up a little box. And in that box are all kinds of things about where to go, what forms to use, where to find the tables to figure out that information, and all of that kind of stuff. Then employers also have the obligation to withhold Social Security and Medicare taxes from an employee's paycheck, and then you also contribute. So there's both a withholding and a contribution that needs to take place. And then the final tax that employers need to be really aware of is the unemployment insurance tax. There's both a state unemployment insurance tax and a federal unemployment insurance tax. And so we talk about the unemployment insurance taxes on another slide in the future, but the federal one, I didn't get time to put information in there about that. But you do need to be aware that those taxes need to be collected and paid in. And I believe the FUTA is paid in on an annual basis, whereas the SUTA, it's depending on the size of your payroll. Okay, let's go to the next slide. The other thing that employers need to be aware of is obtaining workers' compensation coverage. So you must have coverage for every single employer or employee, but I really recommend what you do is shop around. So if you currently have an insurance provider who's doing liability coverage, talk to them to find out if they provide workers' comp coverage, because a lot of times they can give you a better rate. If your own liability coverage provider doesn't do workers' comp for you, you can always go to the Montana State Fund, and I put their website there. They are the workers' comp insurance provider for the whole state if you're not able to find a better rate someplace else. When you go to the link that's above that says Montana Department of Labor and Industry, that takes you directly to the page that talks about workers' compensation insurance in general. And basically what this insurance does is it helps protect employees if they get hurt on the job, and it helps limit your liability if somebody does get hurt while they're working for you. So this is really important coverage. Every employer needs to have it. There are some levels of workers' compensation, like sole proprietors and things like that. There are some reasons why you wouldn't have to get it, but there's a lot of paperwork you need to fill out. So make sure that you read that information and follow up more. And you'll want to make sure that you have your workers' compensation coverage before the employee starts working, because you don't want somebody to get hurt on the job before you've had an opportunity to cover them. And then another thing that employers have to do is they do have to post their proof of workers' compensation coverage. So if you're a small employer and you only have one employee and you don't have a physical work site, sometimes that can be difficult to figure out where to post those sorts of things. If you're not sure what to do, we've got some out-of-the-box ideas that you might be able to utilize. For example, some employers will post these notifications that they need to have up. They'll post them on an intranet within their company. A lot of times you can post these things in an employee break room, or just make them available if there's a specific car or vehicle everybody uses, or even we've seen in the construction industry that they're putting the postings inside the trailer that they use to store their equipment that they use when they're on the job. So that's one thing to think about. Can move on to the next slide. And so this is another important thing for employers to think about. Once you move to that point where you are hiring employees, there are some posting requirements and information that you need to make sure all of your employees have access to and the ability to read and know their rights. So you must display both federal and state of Montana labor law posters where they can be easily viewed by employees. And these posters let people know what their rights are, anything from polygraph testing to the minimum wage to human rights and those sorts of things. If you don't have those posters, the Montana Job Services will provide them to you at no cost, or you can go out to the link that is our website and you can download a lot of these things. They're all available for free. Occasionally, employers will get notifications in the mail that looks like it's coming from an agency like the federal government saying that they're going to get a fine if they don't post these posters and they have to pay like $100 to get them. You don't need to buy them. You can get them online through this website, or we'll bring them out to you or mail them to you. So, but sometimes the ones that you pay for are really nice and laminated, and that might be something that works for your organization as well. So once you've gone through all of these things like setting up your federal identification number, contacting unemployment insurance to make sure that you've covered your employees for unemployment, making sure that you've contacted Department of Revenue to set up your state income tax withholdings, and contacted either your insurance provider or Montana State Fund to do the workers' compensation insurance. Get all of your posters in line. Make sure that you have access to the W-4. You can either print out a paper copy and give that to your new employee, or they can fill it out online. But you are going to want to make sure that you're saving that information and keeping it somewhere where you can access it. The other form that employers need to make sure that they collect at the beginning is the I-9 proof of authorization to work in the United States. And so it really needs to be completed by the first day of work. They do give you some leeway, like up to 3 days after they've started working, you can get that paperwork pulled together. But so when you're hiring someone, it's really important when you're talking to them about coming in for their first day that you make sure that they come prepared to fill this information out. Typically for a lot of people in our state, having access to a social security number and your Montana driver's license with a picture is all you'll need to successfully fill out the I-9 form. But on the back of the form, it does have a lot of other types of identification employees can use to prove that they have the ability to work in the United States. So make sure that you read that and you're really well versed in what types of documentation you can use to fill out the I-9 form correctly. And never tell the employee that they have to bring a specific document in. You need to be able to accept all of the documents that they've got on the back. So I know that a passport is good and you only need to bring the passport. They only need to show one thing. But if they bring in their driver's license, then there is another secondary document that they need to show, like the social security card, that kind of thing. And then you'll want to save your I-9 forms. We recommend that employers keep your I-9 forms separate from any other personnel forms and documentation that you're saving for your employees, just in case you ever get audited by UCIS. Then you can just give them all your I-9 forms and they're not going through all of the records that you've kept on this specific employee. And we've talked about the Montana New Hire Reporting Program. So another thing employers need to think about is, do you need an employee handbook? And it really depends on how big your organization is. If you only have one employee, you really don't need a handbook. There's nothing in federal law or state law that requires a handbook. And once you put together a handbook, It's like you are writing some specific rules and laws for your own company that you need to make sure that you follow. So if you do choose to create a handbook for your company, make sure that you have an attorney help you put it together to make sure that you're not creating any barriers to yourself or any specific procedures that could be problematic in case you ever have to terminate an employee. There are a few things that we recommend if you do choose to have a handbook. One of my personal biases is I feel that if it's a small company, you really need to be able to talk to people one-on-one and not say, here's a handbook, follow the rules. You need to be able to talk to them and make sure they understand what's going on. But as your company gets bigger, adding a handbook can be a really helpful tool. And so you'll want to put things in there like when people get paid, paydays, the work week, uh, what kind of benefits they might have. We always recommend that as a company gets larger, that you have some kind of discrimination and sexual harassment information in there to help people if they need to report those kinds of things. And anything that it would be hard for you to keep track of. So, for example, if you have a really complicated vacation and sick leave policy, and you're not always applying it the same way to every single person, you might want to write down a policy about it to make it easier for you to follow, to make sure that you don't accidentally discriminate against someone because you're not following your own policies. And then down at the bottom of this slide, I've also added some additional employer resources. And when you click on this link, it takes you directly to the Montana Department of Labor Workforce Services Division and a whole bunch of different tools and information for things like applying for the different taxes that you need to apply for, how to find out more about workers' compensation, how to create a handbook, basic things that employers need to be aware of. So let's go to the next slide. And so one of the things that's really important in the state of Montana is making sure you're paying your employees appropriately. And as of September 30th of 2023, they recalculated what Montana's minimum wage is going to be. So starting January 1st, 2024, Montana minimum wage is going to go up to $10.30 an hour. Now, most of us realize that this really is not a living wage for employees. So hopefully you're able to pay a little bit more, but in case you're not, that's the minimum, just so that you're aware. This is something that you don't necessarily have to post, but it's a good one to help your employees understand what some of those rules are. And it talks about some of the exceptions. It gives information about overtime pay and can't read that bottom one. Payment and the payment of wages. So this is all the wage and hour law information about what employers need to be aware of. Let's go to the next slide. I always like to kind of throw in some information, Montana worker stats and how many people are out there in the workforce, because I know a lot of employers are very unhappy. It's difficult to find people who are available for work. And currently statewide, I believe our unemployment insurance rate is 3.5%. So there's only about 21,000 people out there looking for work right now. So we've got over 1 million people in the state of Montana. About 895,000 of them are what we consider working age, 16 and over. And of that 895,000, only about 550,000 are actually in the labor force. 527 of those are actually working, and we have 341,000 people who are of the right age to work, but they're choosing not to work for a variety of reasons. And some of those reasons are things like a lot of people have retired. Over 200,000 people in that section are retired. And then the other big component of that section is people who have to care for children or aging parents or someone who has a disability. So as you're looking for employees, these are things to keep in mind when you do post your positions. We're finding that flexibility and thinking outside of the box is really important for employers. let's go to the next box. Okay, so I also added a couple other things for you to think about. These are tools to helping you keep and retain your employees once you do hire them. And the first one I've got listed is the Incumbent Worker Training Program. And the link takes you straight to the page that tells you a little bit more about the program. It's specifically for employers. You have to have that person has to have worked for you for, I believe, about a year. And then once they've worked for you for that amount of time, if you decide to give them additional training that meets the requirements of the Incumbent Worker Training Program, you can receive a reimbursement. So if this is something that you like to do, you like to provide training for your employees, go out to this website and learn more about it. A lot of the smaller employers aren't applying for it. And now we've just opened it up so that if you have more than 25 employees, you can apply for this training program as well. And I think it pays up to $2,000 for a full-time employee and $1,000 for a part-time employee. And there are different types of training that is acceptable, but it's a really easy read and a really easy application process. They just opened up the funding for this next quarter. So if it's something you're thinking about, I would encourage you to get out there right away and take a look at that. Then another tool that can really help employers is the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. And this is a tax credit available to employers who hire people from specific people who may need assistance in finding jobs. It can be people who are on unemployment, people who are receiving food stamps, individuals with disabilities, and also individuals who've been incarcerated. If you as an employer hire someone who meets one of these criteria, you can receive a tax credit for the wages that you pay for them. And these tax credits can be pretty significant. I think they start at around $2,400 and can go up to $9,600 depending on the amount of wages that you pay that employee. This work opportunity tax credit is something that needs to be done within 28 days of hiring the employee. So you can't look back at your current workforce. It needs to be moving forward. And what we're finding is in the state of Montana, the employers who are really successful using this are employers who just make it part of their hiring process. So when you're having them fill out the W-4 and the I-9 and the new hire reporting information, if you put that work opportunity tax credit paperwork in there as well, so I think it's called the 8815, and there's another document, ETA 960. If you have them fill that out as well, then you can find out before they even start working if they would be eligible, and you might be able to submit them to get this credit. So we're encouraging employers to make that part of your onboarding. And then just some information about labor market. Going out to the Montana's labor market information website, we have lots of great information for employers to help you make good decisions about deciding what your wage rates need to be for what you're hiring for. There are publications, there's information about the current unemployment statistics, there are county profiles. I really recommend everybody take a look at this because it can help guide you when you're trying to set those wage ranges for employees that you're hiring. There's also occupational projections and things like that. Then I've also given you the Job Service website, because we can assist you with things like doing testing of job candidates. If you need a typing test or some other type of testing to prove that the applicant actually knows how to do Excel and things like that, we can help you with testing, pre-testing candidates before hire. And we also have a great cost of turnover calculator so that you can figure out how much it actually costs you when you have to hire a new person. And the publication, that's the direct link to the publications that the Research and Analysis Division puts out. And that one that I really think is important is the wage rates by occupation. I think every employer should take a look at it. Okay, is there one more slide? Oh, so any questions? Hopefully, I know I went over a little bit, and I'm sorry, Jennifer, but I tried to be fast and get it done quick.
You did an excellent job. No, no apology needed. I did have one question. Maybe I can kick that off about the WIOA program. Is that something Job Service helps with? Is that still around?
So we still have that, and that's the Workforce Innovation, and I'm not sure what Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And so what the Montana Department of Labor does is we help provide applicants with rapid retraining. And it typically needs to be something that can be done in 6 months to a year and results in a certificate. And it's specifically to the employee. It's not something that employers really have access to. If you want to hire someone and they're not fully trained, we do have something called on-the-job training that we can work with employers to help pay part of that individual's payroll while they're learning the job. But the retraining is really for, somebody who's maybe lost their job and maybe they want to get cybersecurity training or CNA or CDL or something like that. We'll check and see if the individual is eligible and we can get them into a training program. Is that what you were thinking about, or is there another aspect of it you had a question?
No, that's what I was thinking about. There might be another program out there that helps employers get some financial support for hiring people that might come from a lower wage earning job.
And that would be the Work Opportunity Tax Credit.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the incumbent worker training, that would be if you've already hired the employee and you want to upskill them, make them a better employee for your company, provide them additional training that will make it so that they can either work faster or harder, or even give them a raise because now they have better skills.
Thank you.
I've got a quick question about the incumbent worker training program. Can a sole proprietor or just a single member LLC, so essentially the owner of a business, apply for incumbent worker training grant dollars?
I believe they can. I'm not totally familiar with the program, but I know that I've heard of employers, also the business owner, also participating in training that's happened. So I don't know if you can do it if it's strictly standalone, but it's definitely worth working in, looking into. And like I said, it's reimbursement. So you have to apply for the training, see if you're eligible, see if the training is eligible, and once you get the okay, then you can apply for the training and pay for it and all that sort of stuff, and then they'll send you a reimbursement. But we have had employers wait too long and sign up for the training and prepay for it, and then they're not able to get that reimbursement.
Okay.
Deborah, we had a couple questions come in earlier on. So the first one was, this was back when you were talking about posting the notices in different places around the business.
Yeah.
And the question was, I have just 2 employees. Can I simply provide it to them with their paycheck?
Absolutely, but it'd be a lot of paperwork, I think. Federally, you have to provide 5 things. You have to provide, and I don't have the information right in front of me, so you have to provide OSHA, polygraph protection, equal employment opportunity, Family Medical Leave Act, and then there's one more, Fair Labor Standards Act. And these are very lengthy things. And then statewide, the state postings are, you have to provide proof of unemployment insurance and proof of workers' compensation coverage. So I think that you could certainly put it in every paycheck. I just think that it sounds like a lot of paperwork.
All right.
But, it might be better to have it in an email somewhere that you send to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other question that came in early on was, you mentioned a payroll specialist as someone that might be able to help you with getting set up. How is that person different from an accountant, was the question.
Well, there are people who do bookkeeping type of work, or they are a QuickBooks specialist and help someone set up their payroll, but they have not either gotten their CPA. I mean, they could be an accountant without a CPA or a CMA, but they can be an accounting professional without a professional degree. And they still can be very knowledgeable about getting that paperwork set up to make sure you're doing all the right stuff.
All right.
Yeah.
That clarifies it in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pause here. Are there more questions from anyone? And again, feel free to unmute if you'd like, or send it in via the chat window. So maybe one final question from me then. What are some of the common mistakes that you see new employers make and then maybe come to you after the fact?
You know, especially if it's a small group, it can be really difficult if you want everybody to be your friend, because then it can be hard to be the person who has to make the tough decisions. So it's really important that you be a good leader and you be friendly, but you're also able to draw that distinction between this behavior and this performance is okay, but somebody is my best friend, so I can't tell them that coming into work late every day is a problem when it is. So knowing boundaries and knowing how to set those up can be really important. Another thing that employers really need to focus on, and I didn't talk about this, is making sure that you understand what employees' rights are and following all the rules. If you cut corners, if you don't pay people their overtime, if you're not correctly reporting their status for workers' compensation, you might get away with it for a long time. But if at any point it does get reported and does get investigated and followed up on, the fines and just getting caught up with improper wage with deductions or improper payment of wages, that can add up to a lot and can put somebody out of business if they're not following the rules at the very beginning. And this is another time to really make sure you're talking to your accountant and your legal, whoever who's helping you with your legal, because you want to make sure that you don't start off paying somebody too much money so you're not able to support your business, because the worst thing you can do is give somebody a raise and then have to close your business down because you can't afford to pay them anymore, or terminate them and hire somebody at a lesser rate. So make sure you're working with those professionals to get the right kind of return on investment. Other things are, be really aware of what you're actually hiring the person for, and make sure that you write a really good job description and include on that job description other duties as assigned, because you don't know how your business is going to evolve and change over time. And at some point you may ask your employee to do something they don't want to do, and they'll say, it's not on my job description, I don't have to do it, but you need it to be done. So make sure that you add that to your job descriptions as well. And then if you do decide to do a handbook, the handbook also has to have one of those kind of disclaimers in it that this handbook isn't final. There are things that might happen that will need to discipline you for, and make sure people sign off on it so you can prove that they did get a chance to read the handbook and that kind of thing as well. There's a lot of pitfalls. I don't know. I could go into all kinds of things, and stuff is constantly shifting and moving as jobs change, as society changes, as social media changes. I know that I was speaking with a contractor, I want to say this was 4 or 5 years ago, and he never would have thought that he needed to put in his personnel policy that his staff can't take their cell phones up on the roof and answer phone calls while they're re-roofing a house, because he had somebody fall off because they tried to answer the phone. It's like all kinds of things can happen, lots of changes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Deborah, for sharing not only those last bits of advice, but also the entire presentation today. A lot of great information. And again, for those of you that are watching, we will post those. So if you didn't scramble down all the URL links, that's fine. Be on our website by tomorrow with the recording as well. So any final comments, Deborah, before we sign off today?
Oh, just give us a call if you ever have any questions. If we don't know the answer, we'll direct you to the right professional to help you. And helping businesses be successful and hire employees that are a good fit for their companies is very important to us. And we'd love to help you with that if you need it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining us. And we hope you will see us November 2nd is when we will be back for our next monthly small business webinar. So have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.